It's really important that if you see something at the national level that is scaring you, that is either a headline or an Instagram post, that you dig in a little bit and see, if those same tactics and attempts are being used with where we're putting our own state dollars or using our own resources, because the answer is likely yes, someone is trying to attempt to do that. And that doesn't really align with what we elected them to do. So we've seen a lot of success already from raising our voices around these issues. And we know we're not going to win every fight, but it's really important to continue to raise our voices so that the people we care about in our communities know that they belong here in New Hampshire, because that's what a lot of these policies are telling people. New Hampshire isn't a place that you can have a family. New Hampshire isn't a place that you can raise a trans child. New Hampshire isn't a place where you can choose if, when, and how you become a parent, or it's not guaranteed depending on, your socioeconomic status or your age. So we're not going to stand by and let that happen.
One Quick Thing brings you easy, actionable ways to support your local community in these times where we need it the most. If you're feeling overwhelmed and don't know where to start, join us on this journey as we make meaningful connections and learn how to be better, more engaged members of our communities. On today's episode, we talked to Christina Warriner, New Hampshire's State Director for Reproductive Equity Now. Christina has nearly a decade of experience spanning campaign management, community engagement, and public service. She is a proud social worker, a systems thinker, and a Granite State native.
So, I want to talk a little bit about what's happening in New Hampshire right now. There's obviously a ton happening in the current moment. Talk to me a little bit about Repro Equity Now and the work that you guys are doing in this current moment. What does your life look like right now?
Yeah, that's a heavy question. Repro Equity Now is a New England-based organization, and we have operations here in New Hampshire and in Massachusetts and Connecticut, which are New England neighbors, but whose climates politically look so much different than ours. And so when we've seen large regions of the country totally wipe out access to reproductive health care, not just abortion care, but we're seeing IVF, maternal health care, people struggling across the spectrum of care, our organization believes that we can make New England be a beacon for access to care, both for people who live here and who need to travel here for care. But it's important to recognize that New Hampshire is a bit of a sore spot in that New England region, and that we've been falling behind for a while compared to our neighbors, which, we're recording here on the coast or on the border of Maine, right? So knowing that we travel across state borders all the time for healthcare or work, but that we shouldn't have to, and New Hampshire shouldn't have to have a future like that. So we're here to make sure that New Hampshire keeps up the pace. I'm happy to be from here and to be committed to this work. And we're here to make sure that all folks can access the full spectrum of reproductive health care, no matter their zip code. But it's a fight. It's definitely a fight, and the days are long. But there's a lot of joy in it, too.
Yeah, that's incredible. One question I have for anybody listening, can you explain the difference between equity and equality, since it is in the title of the organization?
Of course. Yeah, I think equality is something that people think, we all deserve the same thing. We all start, it makes an assumption that we all start from the same place and that we would be given the same amount of something, the same amount of a resource, the same rights. I think equity acknowledges that we don't all start from the same place and that there are different barriers because of our lived experience, because of state sanctioned policies or barriers that have been put up by the systems that we exist within that don't allow us to all start at the same place. So when we talk about reproductive equity, it's making sure that there are no political barriers, no stigma, no policy barriers to accessing the care we need, no questions asked.
Can you talk a little bit, you alluded to it at the beginning, about what's happening in New Hampshire specifically? So we're clearly the weird sibling that's doing things a little bit different compared to our neighbors. And sometimes that's a good thing, but it's not. I would argue that it's not in this case. So talk to us a little bit about what's happening specifically in New Hampshire right now.
Yeah, well, I agree we can be a little bit of the weird sibling, but I'll start by just saying that abortion and reproductive rights are very popular in New Hampshire. So I just want to make sure that everyone listening doesn't feel like if they're from New Hampshire that they are, sticking out like a sore thumb or don't fit in. These things are really popular here. We just have some funny things going on that are not having our elected officials fully align with our values. But there's so much I could talk about, but I think a few things that folks might not know about are the threats specifically on family planning and birth control happening in our state house this year. So earlier this year, my mom passed away from metastatic breast cancer. And so I'm high risk for breast cancer and was able to access a cancer screening. And that type of screening is available to all people under the New Hampshire Family Planning Program. So that's a program that has a 53-year history. It's been a bipartisan success story, and it connects thousands of people to breast cancer screenings, cervical cancer screenings, birth control, other family planning resources at low or no cost. And so the House of Representatives in their budget this year completely eliminated that program. And so it's still up for debate on, whether that's going to be fully funded or partially refunded as the Senate considers their budget and then they go into deliberations together. But that is devastating to people's access to healthcare, to their ability to plan their own reproductive futures and lives, and also if they are pregnant or want to be pregnant, to have healthy outcomes. We know that having these screenings, having these tests, having access to this healthcare sets you up for success. So that's one huge piece. And another birth control threat that we're seeing is the attempt to restrict access to confidential birth control for teenagers. That is bananas. We know that every medical organization, institution knows that access to confidential birth control for teens is recommended. We know that if confidentiality isn't assured, people sometimes don't access care. And we also know that most teens do engage with their parents about these decisions, but if they can't, because it puts them at risk, they still deserve to be able to access that care. My mom told me when she was younger that she accessed birth control confidentially at Planned Parenthood when she was 16. And she and my grandma were very close, but that was not a discussion she was able to have because of my grandfather being in the house as well. And so there are so many reasons, right, that could be a decision that you make. But it's important to know that New Hampshire is the lowest teen pregnancy rate in the country. And a lot of that is because of access to care is available and private and non-judgmental. And so these dual things that are happening that are threatening our ability to plan our own families, to access birth control, it's not a mistake. It shows that it was never about abortion altogether. It's about controlling our bodies. And it's something that everyone in New Hampshire should know is going on.
I think that's what's one of the things that's really scary about this moment that we're living in is we're seeing the kind of dystopian stuff play out in front of us, where we see how quickly these things spiral. Is they'll say, oh, this is just a policy for kids, but then we see that a lot with the trans legislation, how that's sort of jumping to adults, and we see how this path that they're walking down seems very clear, and there's no philosophical consistency when it comes. It's like, well, why would you make that birth control unavailable if the goal is to reduce teen pregnancy? There's just like no rhyme or reason to it. And that brings me to my next question where, we just elected Kelly Ayotte, right, as our governor. And a lot of the Republicans were promising, like you said, abortion and all of this sort of reproductive health care is very important to New Hampshire residents. We know that. So when Kelly Ayotte and these folks were running for office, they were promising we're not going to touch any of that, like obviously. And now it seems as if that is changing a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about how this is changing and how it connects to the broader attacks that we're seeing on birth control and family planning?
Totally. Yeah, I think, I don't know if I loved everything that was said, but it was great that abortion and reproductive rights dominated the election cycle in New Hampshire in 2024. It showed that it was important to people. There was so much money and time and effort spent to assure all of us, both from now Governor Ayotte, but also the Republican Party platform in New Hampshire, ensured us no new restrictions on our reproductive freedoms. Everything, will stay the same. And so let's note that Republican folks in the House did introduce a 15-week abortion ban earlier this year. It feels like 20 years ago now that was only a few months ago because it was snowy outside. But because 12,000 people, which is a just unprecedented number, signed in opposition to this bill, it was completely pulled, actually. So they said, okay, we can't get away with this. And now, we see these other attacks, and you mentioned some anti-trans attacks as well, limiting people's access to the care that they can receive, even with the consent of their parents and the guidance of their providers. And so this different control campaign is now going on to limit us, and it is mimicking a lot of what's happening at the national level, too. I think we do have a Democratic congressional delegation here in New Hampshire, but we do have a Republican trifecta, in our state government. And that mirrors what's happening at the national level as well. And so it's really important that if you see something at the national level that is scaring you, that is either a headline or an Instagram post, that you dig in a little bit and see, if those same tactics and attempts are being used with where we're putting our own state dollars or using our own resources, because the answer is likely yes, someone is trying to attempt to do that. And that doesn't really align with what we elected them to do. So we've seen a lot of success already from raising our voices around these issues. And we know we're not going to win every fight, but it's really important to continue to raise our voices so that the people we care about in our communities know that they belong here in New Hampshire, because that's what a lot of these policies are telling people. New Hampshire isn't a place that you can have a family. New Hampshire isn't a place that you can raise a trans child. New Hampshire isn't a place where you can choose if, when, and how you become a parent, or it's not guaranteed depending on, your socioeconomic status or your age. So we're not going to stand by and let that happen.
So many of our listeners are parents who are juggling both parenthood and having jobs and everything else. Can you talk a little bit about why these state policies should be important to them and kind of the ripple effect of how this will affect their lives?
Totally. Unfortunately, yes. I think, as someone who wants to become a parent in the next few years, I said this in front of the Senate Finance Committee, I'm able to access birth control and I'm able to make those plans with my partner. And that's because of my, health insurance. But if I was relying on the family planning program, I wouldn't have those same rights. So, people are, whether it's the, defunding fully or partially of the family planning program, or this ban on confidential access to birth control for teens, people aren't going to access birth control, and they're still going to need or want it, right? People are still going to get cancer, and they are not going to be screened or treated for it. People are going to have the need to be treated for STIs or STDs, and they're not going to have access to treatment for it. And all the while, our trusted healthcare providers or our clinics, who are really like the core of our communities, whether that's our independent clinics, Lovering Health Center and Equality Health Center, or our Planned Parenthood clinics across the state, they're going to be asked to do more with less yet again. And then our families, our communities are going to see rising healthcare costs. So that's also a broken promise, because that's not going to help any of us economically.
No. Can I ask this? I have a question about what's happening in New Hampshire, sort of based on what you're talking about, and we are seeing so much reflection of these national talking points play out in New Hampshire. And what's interesting to me is I feel like my understanding is so many of our representatives in New Hampshire are libertarian leaning folks, or sort of ideologically, there's so much New Hampshire ideology around, keep your hands out of my privacy, keep your hands off of this. Yeah. But we're also seeing so much of a push from those same individuals towards these very intense measures of control, right? Mm-hmm. Like, why are we passing these bills about restricting birth control for teenagers? This feels very intimate and not anyone's business.
Yeah.
Why are they prioritizing these issues, do you think?
If I knew, I would sleep at night, maybe, because I could, change their minds.
It feels hypocritical.
Oh, well, sure. I mean, you can say that.
I can say that.
I think we just need to do so much work on shifting the paradigm around what freedom means and for who we're talking about freedom for. Boom. I think freedom, is limited to this certain view of maybe your freedom to feel safe and comfortable because things are the ways they've looked and the power dynamic is the way you've liked it to be. But freedom doesn't mean, people sometimes talk about safe spaces, right? Like we all need to feel safe. And I like to say we need to feel brave because sometimes you might not feel safe if things are pushing you to grow or consider new ways of being. And that's what we're seeing. They want to keep women and people who can give birth in certain places and in certain economic places as well, right? Where we can participate in our economy and how we can participate in public life. And it's not a mistake. I mean, it's all in Project 2025. So.
It was all there on paper.
Yep, not hiding anything.
No. So talk about, New Hampshire's role in this shift that we're seeing nationally. We're obviously, I think people are very scared about losing their rights right now, all sorts of rights. Yeah. How do you see New Hampshire fitting into that? Are other states kind of watching what happens here? Can you tell me a little bit more about how you think what plays out in New Hampshire over the next few months or years will impact sort of the nationwide landscape?
Yeah, I think, a lot of folks are looking to New England. I think because my friends and colleagues, and I'll speak first to our other states, have been able to pass shield law protections that protect providers of both abortion and gender affirming care. We actually just saw Connecticut protect youth access to contraception literally yesterday. And I said, what a world that I work for an organization that is fighting two different fights, and that's great. Like we celebrate that and we celebrate the political possibility that can happen in a state that's so close to us. But yeah, I think we've seen over the last few years that New Hampshire is the only state that doesn't protect abortion in state statute or constitution in New England. Our transgender discrimination policies have eroded to the place where our closest state near us is West Virginia. Shout out to West Virginia. No offense if you're from there. But we're not fitting in and we're not keeping up. Mm-hmm. And we also are incredibly reliant on federal funding, which is being cut left and right, as we know. So I think we have a real moment of possibility because I like to remain hopeful that we can, stand up and represent what people here have pulled time and time again for supporting, but also just make this a place to live and stay and sustain and grow. I was born here. I left for a bit, but I'm back. I'm a homeowner here. I want to start my family here, and I want that to be possible for all people. And so I think it's going to get to a tipping point where New Hampshire needs to make those decisions because reproductive rights sometimes seem siloed, but that's part of your family building. That's part of your future building, whether you want a family or not. And it's something that can't be ignored. So we need to catch up. We need to show up.
I want to talk a little bit about, on a more positive note, you kind of alluded to the fact that there has been a lot of vocal opposition to these bills and these things that are getting brought up in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like some of that is breaking through. We know all of it isn't, but can you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, are you feeling hopeful seeing the energy that's coming kind of from the population? And are you seeing a lot of support from normal people that are standing up and saying, hey, these are not in line with what people in New Hampshire actually want?
Yeah, I think we've seen so much energy, right, this year. And I personally, I'll be honest with you, I've been a little surprised about that. I think I was going into this year, I was really worried that we were going to be able to sustain the pace that we had to go at during the first Trump administration. I think during a lot of our original reckoning with some of these systems being broken down or things that we took for granted being questioned, along with a lot of other social movements occurring around public health with COVID and Black Lives Matter. But I think people have become really intentional about finding a thing and doing it. I think that's even what you all are doing here. People seem to be moving at a pace that is fast and that is urgent, but that is making the other side move. I mean, are they truly going to cut Medicaid and impact all of our lives in a way that would be, both devastating to us, but also devastating to their electoral hopes? I think there are just some things that people are really fighting back against, and that's really exciting. And I think, again, though, I see a lot of folks focus on the national thing. So I'm so excited that you all are focusing a bit more on what's happening here, because that would be the only place I would ask people to continue to turn their energy to. If they're focused nationally, thank you. Continue to turn your focus towards what's local. Know who your state reps, state senator are, know who your executive counselor is, and get comfortable having their number in your cell phone. They might be off this summer or not in active session, but you can get coffee with them. They should answer the call. So I would say hoping that the momentum continues in that way, because we've seen some small wins and, the defeat of the 15-week abortion ban and a few other things be kind of re-referred or reconsidered. And so we'll keep up the fight and we at least live to fight another day. So I'll take that as a win.
Looking forward, what would you recommend looking out for in the coming months? Mm-hmm. And how would you also recommend our listeners sort of stay informed without getting overwhelmed?
Yeah, totally. So June's a huge month. So June 5th is a huge day at the State House. There's going to be votes on a lot of things that we've discussed today. So the Senate budget will be voted on, which would include or not include the family planning funding. We'll see votes on the bills that may include the restrictions on confidential birth control for teens. We'll see some votes that would ban access to healthcare for transgender youth. And so that's going to be a really big day. And if you follow along with our organization, Reproductive Equity Now, we'll be updating our, volunteers and followers about that, as well as a lot of our coalition partners will. The session this year will be over at the end of the month. So the budget will have to be signed for the next 2 years. So a budget is a direct, direct messaging of our values. So stay up to date on what's included in that budget. There's also some things that have already passed through that are including, a ban for folks to be in the bathrooms in spaces that align with their gender, that veto campaigns are going on around right now. So pay attention to those as well. But I would say there isn't a particular day in June you should pay attention to, because June is just a really important month. But letting you know that it will ease up a little bit after that, at least in state politics. So, this is that end of the marathon. So full sprint ahead, everybody. But I would also say, to get too overwhelmed, follow us on social media. You can go and sign up for our newsletter. A lot of our trusted partners are doing really great work too. So just, engage with that in some level in your day-to-day emails or social media, so that you can make sure that you are keeping tabs on what's happening. And even if you miss something, because you're going to, right? Like I miss things, I'll bring it up again. Maybe consider still reaching out to your elected official, even if it's in July, August, whenever. They don't go back into session until next January. There's a lot of time to hold them accountable or to thank them for how they voted and what they sponsored and how they operated and showed up for you or didn't. So don't be discouraged if you miss a deadline. There's a lot of time to let them know how you feel about what they did.
Awesome.
I love the recommendation to add your representatives' phone numbers in your cell phone, because I feel like a lot of our reps, we have so many reps in New Hampshire, right?
400.
Like crazy town. And I feel like a lot of them are used to being able to vote on this unpopular legislation and then just go back to their normal lives and be left alone. And my opinion is, like, if you're voting to actively take rights away from people, you should know no peace, right? Like, I think that if you are making these horrible, horrible votes and doing these things that impact people's lives greatly, at the very least, you should be bombarded with phone calls. And I hear from a lot of people on social media that are saying, like, I'm from one of these regions.
Yeah.
These are my reps.
Yeah.
We live on the seacoast. We have a lot of great reps, which we're very lucky about. And we try to kind of thank them for the work that they're doing. But I think when you have those challenging reps that are making these really challenging decisions, reaching out to them and letting them know is important. Do you feel like how's the vibe kind of at the State House? Does it feel any different this year? Does it feel like things are? Yeah, I guess it's kind of a vague question, but
Yeah.
you know, are you getting that sense from people that things are shifting a little bit?
I mean, I'm not going to share insider secrets because things are still moving, right? And we gotta win what we have to win. But I'll say two things. I think public knowledge is that we know that the Republican Party leadership has been very tight on their caucuses this year. People have been kicked off of committees because of not voting on party lines. And so there's been a lot of control in that way as well. I'm really interested to see how that lines up with as representatives and senators return to their communities more this summer. Obviously, they live there, but when they're more in community at events this summer and this fall and consider re-election next year, how that will align, because of course that's who you speak to, and I think some of them bravely stand up and vote in that way, and others, make other choices. So I feel like that pressure is being built, yes, and I think it will be interesting to see how it plays out. And so that's why we have to just keep the pressure on. And thank you again for bringing up, letting those folks know. You also mentioned thanking the people that are voting in ways that align with our values, and I just can't emphasize enough how important it is to do that. The amount of times I've thanked someone and they're like, oh, this is the one good email I got today. It just really matters. There are people who are showing up every day, going into fights they know they're going to lose. So just continue to thank them. Never forget to do that. It's really easy to talk about what we're angry about, right? But there are people who are really fighting for us against all odds sometimes. So let's keep them feeling the love too.
That's a great point, because one of the things we've talked about a lot is how our reps are super underpaid or not paid, right? Like they're not paid at all.
Well, $100 is a living wage, so
crazy.
Half of your groceries.
So these people are basically volunteering, and there's a lot of younger legislators that we're seeing too now that are just out of college, and they're taking their time to do this. And it's I can't imagine, it must feel like you're just pushing this rock up the hill every day. And we
want them to run for re-election.
Yes, we need it, right? Like I just said with so much comfort, oh, we've got good reps here, so we're fine.
Yeah.
But we need them to keep running and engaging in this process that isn't super rewarding in a lot of ways in a moment like this. And so also run for office, right?
Yeah.
If you live in one of those regions, I'm begging you, run, please. We need you desperately. That's a big thing, right? That would be a big thing, running for office. But what we try to focus on in this podcast is what's one quick thing you can incorporate into your life, one quick thing you can incorporate into your routine to kind of be a more engaged member of your community, to engage with this type of politics that are happening. So what's something that our listeners could do today to support this work, or they can integrate more support for reproductive equity into their life, just in general?
Yeah, the immediate one would be, so one of the bills that limits or bans access to confidential birth control for teens didn't even have a public hearing when it was amended to do so. It changed.
Yeah.
So we launched a petition a lot for that reason, to make sure that they heard our voices. So we launched a petition that just says no restrictions on birth control in New Hampshire, both for teens, for folks who need low or no access birth control, like we talked about through the New Hampshire Family Planning Program. So I'm sure we'll include that in the link to the show notes. But encourage you to sign that petition. We already delivered it once to legislators before the House vote, what we thought was the House vote. It got bumped back. We're going to keep showing up and doing that. So we'd encourage you to sign that. And my larger long piece is, get to know your rep over the summer, get to know your senator over the summer, and ask them directly how they supported abortion access this year, how they supported maternal health access this year, how they supported trans rights this year. Make them know it's important to you. That just can't be understated. keep asking them, and ask them in public forums as well, through LTEs or op-eds or at town halls, that they should be having.
I love
Who's
that.
to say if they are?
Amen.
I like how you framed that question too, of asking them like how they're supporting this issue you care about, because I think sometimes as we're trying to get more engaged in this stuff, we get a little scared of like, I don't know how to talk about it, and I don't know the right bill, and there's letters and numbers and like, what am I supposed to say? I think the scripts are great. There's a lot of like 5 calls, that type of thing is great. You guys do a lot of scripts, but I think just that prompt of like, just tell me how you're supporting this cause is going to really illuminate a lot. That will tell, oh, that's all you need to ask.
Yeah.
And I think that that's so important. So yeah, getting to know your reps is huge.
Yeah. Can we plan like a big coffee date basically where we invite our reps to come and like sit with us?
Office hours.
I mean, you
we'll hold
can.
all
I know
office hours.
some reps do things like that. I mean, and just a reminder to everyone, as you said, there's 400 state reps. I think each of them represent somewhere between 3,500 and under 4,000 constituents. I mean, they should have time to chat with you. So, I mean, let's plan some parties. Let's plan some coffees.
Let's do
Oh my
it.
gosh, I love that. Wait, what if we do that? Can we like bring back like Pampered Chef vibes, but for politics? So it's like I have all the people over, we have a snack, and then we bring
a reproductive equity party.
Yeah.
Wait, I love that. Thank you so much for being here. This was awesome. Where should people follow you and keep up with you and the organization?
Yeah, we're all over social media at Repro Equity now. I think we quit RIP Twitter, but you can find us on Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram, Threads, if people are still using that, all of the places. Sign up for our newsletter as well. You can go to reproequitynow.org/join us.
Amazing. Thank you for
Thank you.
talking to us and making time for us today.
Yeah.